The consciousness of the absolute or sense of the presence of God. This consciousness, in its various forms and degrees, is perhaps the most constant characteristic of illumination, and makes it, for the mystic soul, a pleasure state of the intensest kind. I do not mean by this that the subject passes months or years in a continuous ecstasy of communion with the divine. Intermittent periods of spiritual fatigue or aridity, renewals of the temperamental conflicts experienced in purgation, the oncoming gloom of the dark night, all these may be, and often are, experienced at intervals during the illuminated life, as flashes of insight, indistinguishable from illumination, constantly break the monotony of the purgative way. But a deep certitude of the personal life omnipresent in the universe has been achieved, and this can never be forgotten, even though it be withdrawn. The spirit stretching towards God declares that it has touched him, and its normal condition henceforth is joyous consciousness of his presence, with many privy touchings of sweet spiritual sights and feeling, measured to us as our simpleness may bear it. Where he prefers less definite or more pantheistic language, the mystic's perceptions may take the form of harmony with the infinite, the same divine music transposed to a lower key. This sense of God is not a metaphor. Innumerable declarations prove it to be a consciousness as sharp as that which other men have, or think they have, of color, heat, or light. It is a well-known, though usually transitory experience in the religious life. Like the homing instinct of birds, a fact which can neither be denied nor explained, how that presence is felt, it may better be known by experience than by any writing, says Hilton. For it is the life and the love, the might and the light, the joy and the rest of a chosen soul. And therefore he that hath soothfastly once felt it, he may not forbear it without pain. He may not undesire it. It is so good in itself and so comfortable. He cometh privily sometimes when thou art least aware of him, but thou shalt well know him or he go. For wonderfully he stirreth, and mightily he turneth thy heart into beholding of his goodness, and doth thine heart melt delectably as wax against the fire into softness of his love. Modern psychologists have struggled hard to discredit this sense of the presence, sometimes attributing it to the psychic mechanism of projection, sometimes to wish fulfillments of a more unpleasant origin. The mystics, however, who discriminate so much more delicately than their critics between true and false transcendental experience, never feel any doubt about its validity. Even when their experience seems inconsistent with their theology, they refuse to be disturbed. Thus, St. Teresa writes of her own experience with her usual simplicity and directness. In the beginning, it happened to me that I was ignorant of one thing. I did not know that God was in all things. And when he seemed to me to be so near, I thought it impossible. Not to believe that he was present was not in my power, for it seemed to me, as it were, evident that I felt there his very presence. Some unlearned men used to say to me that he was present only by his grace. I could not believe that because, as I am saying, he seemed to me to be present himself, so I was distressed. A most learned man of the order of the glorious Patriarch St. Dominic delivered me from this doubt, for he told me that he was present, and how he communed with us. This was a great comfort to me. Again, an interior peace and the little strength which either pleasures or displeasures have to remove this presence during the time it lasts of the three persons, and that without power to doubt of it, continue in such a manner that I clearly seem to experience what St. John says, that he will dwell in the soul, and this not only by grace, but that he will also make her perceive this presence. St. Teresa's strong immanental bent comes out well in this passage. Such a sense of the divine presence may go side by side with the daily life and normal mental activities of its possessor, who is not necessarily an ecstatic or an abstracted visionary, remote from the work of the world. It is true that the transcendental consciousness has now become, once for all, his center of interest. Its perceptions and admonitions dominate and light up his daily life. The object of education in the Platonic sense has been achieved. His soul has wheeled round from the perishing world to the contemplation of the real world and the brightest part thereof. But where vocation and circumstances require it, the duties of a busy outward life continue to be fulfilled with steadiness and success, and this without detriment to the soul's contemplation of the real. In many temperaments of the unstable or artistic type, however, this intuitional consciousness of the absolute becomes ungovernable. It constantly breaks through, obtaining forcible possession of the mental field and expressing itself in the psychic phenomena of ecstasy and rapture. In others, less mobile, it wells up into an impassioned apprehension, a flame of love in which the self seems to meet God in the ground of the soul. This is pure contemplation, that state of deep horizon in which the subject seems to be seeing, feeling, and thinking all at once. But by this spontaneous exercise of all his powers under the dominion of love, the mystic attains that vision of the heart, which, more interior perhaps than the visions of dream or ecstasy, stretches to the full those very faculties which it seems to be holding in suspense. As a top sleeps when it is spinning fast, ego dormio et cor meum vigilant. This act of contemplation, this glad surrender to an overwhelming consciousness of the presence of God, leaves no sharp image on the mind, only a knowledge that we have been lifted up to a veritable gazing upon that which eye hath not seen. St. Bernard gives in one of his sermons a simple, ingenuous, and obviously personal account of such privy touchings, such convincing but elusive contacts of the soul with the Absolute. Now bear with my foolishness for a little while, he says, for I wish to tell you, as I have promised, how such events have taken place in me. It is indeed a matter of no importance, but I put myself forward only that I may be of service to you. And if you derive any benefit, I am consoled for my egotism. If not, I shall but have displayed my foolishness. I confess then, though I say it in my foolishness, that the Word has visited me, and even very often, but though he has frequently entered into my soul, I have never at any time been sensible of the precise moment of his coming. I have felt that he was present. I remember that he has been with me. I have sometimes been able even to have a presentiment that he would come, but never to feel his coming nor his departure. For whence he came to enter my soul, or whither he went on quitting it, by what means he has made entrance or departure, I confess that I know not even to this day, according to that which is said, Necis unde veniat aut quo varat. Nor is this strange, because it is to him that the psalmist has said in another place, Vestigia tua non cognoscentur. It is not by the eyes that he enters, for he is without form or color that they can discern, nor by the ears, for his coming is without sound, nor by the nostrils, for it is not with the air, but with the mind that he is blended. By what avenue, then, has he entered? Or perhaps the fact may be that he has not entered at all, nor indeed come at all from outside, for not one of these things belongs to outside, yet it has not come from within me, for it is good, and I know that in me dwelleth no good thing. I have ascended higher than myself, and lo, I have found the word above me still. My curiosity has led me to descend below myself also, and yet I have found him still at a lower depth. If I have looked without myself, I have found that he is beyond that which is outside of me, and if within, he was at an inner depth still. And thus have I learned the truth of the words I have read, in ipso enim vivimus et movemur et sumus. Such a lifting up, such a condition of consciousness as that which Saint Bernard is here trying to describe, seems to snatch the spirit for a moment into a state which it is hard to distinguish from that of true union. This is what the contemplatives call passive or infused contemplation, or sometimes the horizon of union, a brief foretaste of the unitive state, often enjoyed for short periods in the illuminative way, which reinforces their conviction that they have now truly attained the Absolute. It is but a foretaste, however, of that attainment, the precocious effort of a soul still in that stage of enlightening, which the Theologica Germanica declares to be belonging to such as are growing. This distinction between the temporary experience of union and the achievement of the unitive life is well brought out in a fragment of dialogue between soul and self in view of St. Victor's mystical tract, De Arha Animae. The soul says, "Tell me, what can be this thing of delight that merely by its memory touches and moves me with such sweetness and violence that I am drawn out of myself and carried away, I know not how. I am suddenly renewed, I am changed, I am plunged into an ineffable peace. My mind is full of gladness, all my past wretchedness and pain is forgot. My soul exults, my intellect is illuminated, my heart is afire, my desires have become kindly and gentle. I know not where I am, because my love has embraced me. Also, because my love has embraced me, I seem to have become possessed of something, and I know not what it is, but I try to keep it, that I may never lose it. My soul strives in gladness that she may not be separated from that which she desires to hold fast forever, as if she had found in it the goal of all her desires. She exults in a sovereign and ineffable manner, seeking naught, desiring naught, but to rest in this. Is this, then, my beloved? Tell me that I may know him, and that if he come again, I may entreat him to leave me not, but to stay with me forever. Man says, it is indeed thy beloved who visits thee, but he comes in an invisible shape, he comes disguised, he comes incomprehensibly. He comes to touch thee, not to be seen of thee, to arouse thee, not to be comprehended of thee. He comes not to give himself wholly, but to be tasted by thee, not to fulfill thy desire, but to lead upwards thy affection. He gives a foretaste of his delights, brings not the plenitude of a perfect satisfaction, and the earnest of thy betrothal consists chiefly in this, that he who shall afterwards give himself to be seen and possessed by thee perpetually, now permits himself to be sometimes tasted, that thou mayest learn how sweet he is. This shall console thee for his absence, and the savor of this gift shall keep thee from all despair. The real distinction between the illuminative and the unitive life is that in illumination, the individuality of the subject, however profound his spiritual consciousness, however close his apparent communion with the infinite, remains separate and intact. His heightened apprehension of reality lights up rather than obliterates the rest of his life, and may even increase his power of dealing adequately with the accidents of normal existence. Thus, Brother Lawrence found that his acute sense of reality, his apprehension of the presence of God, and the resulting detachment and consciousness of liberty in regard to mundane things upheld and assisted him in the most unlikely tasks, as, for instance, when he was sent into Burgundy to buy wine for his convent, which was a very unwelcome task to him, because he had no turn for business and because he was lame and could not go about the boat but by rolling himself over the casks. That, however, he gave himself no uneasiness about it, nor about the purchase of the wine, that he said to God it was his business he was about, and that he afterwards found it very well performed, so likewise in his business in the kitchen, to which he had naturally a great aversion. The mind, concentrated upon a higher object of interest, is undistracted by its own anxieties, likes or dislikes, and hence performs the more efficiently the work that it is given to do. Where it does not do so, then the normal makeup or imperfect discipline of the subject, rather than its mystical proclivities, must be blamed. St. Catherine of Genoa found in this divine companionship the power which made her hospital a success. St. Teresa was an administrator of genius and an admirable housewife, and declared that she found her God very easily amongst the pots and pans. Appearances notwithstanding, Mary would probably have been a better cook than Martha had circumstances required of her this form of activity. In persons of feeble or diffuse intelligence, however, and above all in victims of a self-regarding spirituality, this deep absorption in the sense of divine reality may easily degenerate into monoideism. Then the shady side of illumination, a selfish preoccupation with transcendental joys, the spiritual gluttony condemned by St. John of the Cross, comes out. I made many mistakes, says Madame Guyon pathetically, through allowing myself to be too much taken up by my interior joys. I used to sit in a corner and work, but I could hardly do anything, because the strength of this attraction made me let the work fall out of my hands. I spent hours in this way without being able to open my eyes or to know what was happening to me. So simply, so peacefully, so gently that sometimes I said to myself, can heaven itself be more peaceful than I? Here we see Madame Guyon basking like a pious tabby cat in the beams of the uncreated light, and already leaning to the extravagances of quietism, with its dangerous double character of passivity and beatitude. The heroic aspect of the mystic vocation is in abeyance. Those mystical impressions which her peculiar psychic makeup permitted her to receive have been treated as a source of personal and placid satisfactions, not as a wellspring whence new vitality might be drawn for great and self-giving activities. It has been claimed by the earlier biographers of St. Catherine of Genoa that she passed in the crisis of her conversion directly through the purgative to the unitive life, and never exhibited the characteristics of the illuminative way. This has been effectually disproved by Baron von Hugel, though he too is inclined in her case to reject the usual sequence of the mystic states. Yet the description of Catherine's condition after her 4 great penitential years were ended, as given in Cap 6 of the Vita e Dottrina, is an almost perfect picture of healthy illumination of the inward or immanental type, and makes an effective foil to the passage which I have quoted from Madame Guyon's life. No doubt, there were hours in which St. Catherine's experience, as it were, ran ahead, and she felt herself not merely lit up by the indwelling light, but temporarily merged in it. These moments are responsible for such passages as the beautiful fragment in Cap 5, which does, when taken alone, seem to describe the true unitive state. Sometimes she said, "I do not see or feel myself to have either soul, body, heart, will, or taste, or any other thing except pure love." Her normal condition of consciousness, however, was clearly not yet that which Julian of Norwich calls being one with bliss, but rather an intense and continuous communion with an objective reality which was clearly realized as distinct from herself. After the aforesaid 4 years, says the next chapter of the Vita, there was given unto her a purified mind, free and filled with God, insomuch that no other thing could enter into it. Thus, when she heard sermons or mass, so much was she absorbed in her interior feelings that she neither heard nor saw that which was said or done without. But within, in the sweet divine light, she saw and heard other things, being wholly absorbed by that interior light, and it was not in her power to act otherwise. St. Catherine, then, is still a spectator of the Absolute, does not feel herself to be one with it, and it is a marvelous thing that with so great an interior recollection, the Lord never permitted her to go beyond control. But when she was needed, she always came to herself, so that she was able to reply to that which was asked of her. And the Lord so guided her that none could complain of her. And she had her mind so filled by love divine that conversation became hard to her. And by this continuous taste and sense of God, several times she was so greatly transported that she was forced to hide herself that she might not be seen. It is clear, however, that Catherine herself was aware of the transitory and imperfect nature of this intensely joyous state. Her growing transcendental self, unsatisfied with the sunshine of the illuminative way, the enjoyment of the riches of God, already aspired to union with the divine. With her, as with all truly heroic souls, it was love for love, not love for joy. She cried to God because he gave her so many consolations. Non voglio quello che esci da te, ma sol voglio te, o dolce amore. Non voglio quello che esce da te. When the growing soul has reached this level of desire, the illuminative way is nearly at an end. It has seen the goal, that country which is no mere vision, but a home, and is set upon the forward march. So Rabia, the Muslim saint, "O my God, my concern and my desire in this world is that I should remember thee above all the things of this world, and in the next that out of all who are in that world I should meet with thee alone. So Gertrude Moore, no knowledge which we can here have of thee can satisfy my soul seeking and longing without ceasing after thee. Alas, my Lord God, what is all thou canst give to a loving soul, which sigheth and panteth after thee alone, and esteemeth all things as dung, that she may gain thee? What is all, I say, whilst thou givest not thyself, who art that one thing which is only necessary, and which alone can satisfy our souls? Was it any comfort to Saint Mary Magdalene, when she sought thee, to find two angels which presented themselves instead of thee? Verily, I cannot think it was any joy unto her, for that soul that hath set her whole love and desire on thee can never find any true satisfaction but only in thee. What is the nature of this mysterious mystic illumination? Apart from the certitude it imparts, what is the form which it most usually assumes in the consciousness of the self? The illuminatives seem to assure us that its apparently symbolic name is really descriptive, that they do experience a kind of radiance, a flooding of the personality with new light. A new sun rises above the horizon and transfigures their twilight world. Over and over again, they return to light imagery in this connection. Frequently, as in their first conversion, they report an actual and overpowering consciousness of radiant light, ineffable in its splendor, as an accompaniment of their inward adjustment. Sapere omne lingue amor, bontà senza figura, lume fuor de misura, risplende nel mio core, sang Jacopone da Tori. Light rare, untellable, said Whitman. The flowing light of the Godhead, said Mechthild of Magdeburg, trying to describe what it was that made the difference between her universe and that of normal men. Lux vixens deceit, said Saint Hildegard of her revelations. Lux vixens decet, which she described as appearing in a special light, more brilliant than the brightness round the sun. It is an infused brightness, says Saint Teresa, a light which knows no night, but rather, as it is always light, nothing ever disturbs it. De subito parve giorno a giorno essere aggiunto, exclaims Dante, initiated into the atmosphere of heaven, lume è lassù, in his constant declaration, Quio ceo dico è un semplice lume, his last word in the effort to describe the soul's apprehension of the being of God. It really seems as though the mystics' attainment of new levels of consciousness did bring with it the power of perceiving a splendor always there, but beyond the narrow range of our poor sight, to which it is only a luminous darkness at the best. In eternal nature, or the kingdom of heaven, said Law, materiality stands in life and light. The cumulative testimony on this point is such as would be held to prove in any other department of knowledge that there is indeed an actual light lighting the very light and awaiting the recognition of men. Consider the accent of realism with which St. Augustine speaks of his own experience of Platonic contemplation, a passage in which we seem to see a born psychologist desperately struggling by means of negations to describe an intensely positive state. I entered into the secret closet of my soul led by thee, and this I could do because thou wast my helper. I entered and beheld with the mysterious eye of my soul, the light that never changes, above the eye of my soul, above my intelligence. It was not the common light which all flesh can see, nor was it greater yet of the same kind, as if the light of day were to grow brighter and brighter and flood all space. It was not like this, but different, altogether different from all such things. Nor was it above my intelligence in the same way as oil is above water or heaven above earth, but it was higher because it made me, and I was lower because made by it. He who knoweth the truth knoweth that light, and who knoweth it knoweth eternity. Love knoweth it. Here, as in the cases of Saint Teresa, Saint Catherine of Genoa, and Giacomo da Todi, we have a characteristically immanental description of the illuminated state. The self, by the process which mystics call introversion, the deliberate turning inwards of its attention, its connotative powers, discerns reality within the heart. The rippling tide of love which flows secretly from God into the soul and draws it mightily back into its source. But the opposite or transcendental tendency is not less frequent. The cosmic vision of infinity exterior to the subject, the expansive outgoing movement towards a divine light, che visibile face, lo creatore a quella creatura, che solo in lui vedere la sua pace. Wholly other than anything the earth-born creature can conceive, and that means which makes visible the Creator to that creature who only in beholding him finds its peace. Yeah. The strange, formless absorption in the divine dark to which the soul is destined to ascend, all these modes of perception are equally characteristic of the illuminative way. As in conversion, so here reality may be apprehended in either transcendent or immanent, positive or negative terms. It is both near and far, closer to us than our most inward part, and higher than our highest. And for some selves, that which is far is easiest to find. To a certain type of mind, the veritable practice of the presence of God is not the intimate and adorable companionship of the personal comrade or the inward light, but the awestruck contemplation of the Absolute, the naked Godhead, source and origin of all that is. It is an ascent to the supernal plane of perception where the simple, absolute, and unchangeable mysteries of heavenly truth lie hidden in the dazzling obscurity of the secret silence, outshining all brilliance with the intensity of their darkness, and surcharging our blinded intellects with the utterly impalpable and invisible fairness of glories which exceed all beauty. With such an experience of eternity, such a vision of the triune, all-including absolute, which binds the universe with love, Dante ends his Divine Comedy and the mystic joy with which its memory fills him is his guarantee that he has really seen the inviolate rose, the flaming heart of things. O abbondante grazia, und io presunsi ficar lo viso per la luce eterna, tanto che la veduta vi consunsi, nel suo profondo vidi che se interna, legato con amore in un volume, cio che per l'universo si squaderna, sostanzia ed accidenti e lor costume, quasi conflate insieme per tal modo che ciò che io dico è un semplice lume, la forma universale di questo nodo. Credo che io vide perché più di largo. Dicendo questo mi sento ciò godo. O quanto è corto il dire e come fiocco al mio concetto. E questo a quel che io vidi è tanto che non basta a dicer poco. O luce eterna che sola in te sidi, sola te intendi e da te intelletta ed intendente te a me ed aridi. Which means, O grace abounding, wherein I presumed to fix my gaze on the eternal light so long that I consumed my sight thereon. In its depths I saw ingathered the scattered leaves of the universe, bound into one book by love, substance and accident in their relations, as if fused together in such a manner that what I tell of is a simple light, and I believe that I saw the universal form of this complexity, because as I say this, I feel that I rejoice more deeply. Oh, but how scant the speech, and how faint to my concept, and that too what I saw is such that it suffices not to call it little. O light eternal, who only in thyself abidest, only thyself dost comprehend, and of thyself comprehended, and thyself comprehending dost love and smile. In Dante, the transcendent and impersonal aspect of illumination is seen in its most exalted form. It seems at first sight almost impossible to find room within the same system for this expansive vision of the undifferentiated light and such intimate and personal apprehensions of deity as Lady Julian's conversations with her courteous and dear-worthy lord, or St. Catherine's companionship with love divine. Yet all these are really reports of the same psychological state, describe the attainment by selves of different types of the same stage in the soul's progressive apprehension of reality. In a wonderful passage, unique in the literature of mysticism, Angela of Foligno has reported the lucid vision in which she perceived this truth: the twofold revelation of an absolute, at once humble and omnipotent, personal and transcendent, the unimaginable synthesis of unspeakable power and deep humility. The eyes of my soul were opened, and I beheld the plenitude of God, wherein I did comprehend the whole world, both here and beyond the sea, and the abyss and ocean and all things. In all these things I beheld naught save the divine power, in a manner assuredly indescribable, so that through excess of marveling the soul cried with a loud voice, saying, This whole world is full of God. Wherefore I now comprehended how small a thing is the whole world, that is to say, both here and beyond the seas, the abyss, the ocean, and all things, and that the power of God exceeds and fills all. Then he said unto me, I have shown thee something of my power. And I understood that after this I should better understand the rest. He then said, Behold now my humility. Then was I given an insight into the deep humility of God towards man, and comprehending that unspeakable power and beholding that deep humility, my soul marveled greatly, and did esteem itself to be nothing at all. It must never be forgotten that all apparently one-sided descriptions of illumination, more, all experiences of it are governed by temperament. That light whose smile kindles the universe is ever the same, but the self through whom it passes and by whom we must receive its report has already submitted to the molding influences of environment and heredity, church and state. The very language of which that self avails itself in its struggle for expression links it with 100 philosophies and creeds. The response which it makes to divine love will be the same in type as the response which its nature would make to earthly love, but raised to the nth degree. We, receiving the revelation, receive with it all those elements which the subject has contributed in spite of itself. Hence, the soul's apprehension of divine reality may take almost any form, from the metaphysical ecstasies which we find in Dionysus to a less degree in St. Augustine, to the simple, almost common sense statements of Brother Lawrence, the emotional ardors of St. Gertrude, or the lovely intimacies of Julian or Mechthild. Sometimes so rich and varied does the nature of the great mystic tend to be. The exalted and impersonal language of the Dionysian theology goes, with no sense of incongruity, side by side with homely parallels drawn from the most sweet and common incidents of daily life. Suso, in whom illumination and purgation existed side by side for 16 years, alternately obtaining possession of the mental field, and whose oscillations between the harshest mortification and the most ecstatic pleasure states were exceptionally violent and swift, is a characteristic instance of such an attitude of mind. His illumination was largely of the intimate and immanental type, but as we might expect in a pupil of Eckhart, it was not without touches of mystical transcendence which break out with sudden splendor side by side with those tender and charming passages in which the servitor of the eternal wisdom tries to tell his love. Thus he describes in one of the earlier chapters of his life how, whilst he was thinking according to his custom of the most lovable wisdom, he questioned himself and interrogated his heart, which sought persistently for love, saying, "O my heart, whence comes this love and grace? Whence comes this gentleness and beauty, this joy and sweetness of the heart? Does not all this flow forth from the Godhead, as from its origin? Come, let my heart, my senses, and my soul immerse themselves in the deep abyss, whence come these adorable things. What shall keep me back? Today I will embrace you, even as my burning heart desires to do." And at this moment there was within his heart, as it were, an emanation of all good, all that is beautiful, all that is lovable and desirable was there spiritually present, and this in a manner which cannot be expressed. Whence came the habit that every time he heard God's praises sung or said, he recollected himself in the depths of his heart and soul, and thought on that beloved object, whence comes all love. It is impossible to tell how often, with eyes filled with tears and open heart, he has embraced his sweet friend and pressed him to a heart overflowing with love. He was like a baby which a mother holds upright on her knees, supporting it with her hands beneath its arms. The baby, by the movements of its little head and all its little body, tries to get closer and closer to its dear mother, and shows by its little laughing gestures the gladness in its heart. Thus did the heart of the servitor ever seek the sweet neighborhood of the divine wisdom, and thus he was, as it were, altogether filled with delight.